So for this jumper I'm going to use this yarn, which is 100% wool, and my needles will be 5 mm. The first thing that I'm going to do is to knit a gauge. I know it's a bit boring, but please trust me, you should always do it, especially if you are going to knit such big projects, because if you don't get the same size as the gauge, for example, here if I knit 17 stitches by 22 rows, I should get 10 by 10 centimeters. I will need to adjust the number of stitches in order to get the same size for the jumper. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to cast on my stitches. Here it says that I should cast on 17 stitches, but I'm going to cast on 21 because I would like to have a little space in order to lay flat my gauge and be able to measure it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to cast on my stitches. Please cast on the stitches for the gauge the way you prefer it. If you have watched my other tutorials, you'll know that I do it this way, but of course you can cast on your stitches any way you like, and I will meet you then. Now I'm ready to start knitting the pattern. As I said, this is going to be a very easy pattern. I'm going to create squares of knit and purl stitches. So for my first row I am just going to knit my stitches because the first row is not part of the pattern. So I always slip the first stitch on my right needle, and now I'm going to knit the rest of my stitches. The first row is always a bit difficult to knit. You can use half a size bigger needles if you like. Probably you know how to knit the stitches, so please knit the stitches the way you prefer, and I will meet you at the end of the row to start knitting the second row, which is going to be a row of the pattern. Please remember to keep track on how many rows you have knitted, because this is what we need to do in order to know the right gauge. So now I'm at the end of my first row. I have these 2 stitches which I am going to slip, and now I'm ready to start knitting the pattern of the jumper. As I said, this is going to be a very easy pattern. I'm going to create squares of knit and purl stitches. So my first stitch, I'm just going to slip it on the right needle, and then I'm going to purl the next one. So 2 stitches are purl stitches. Now I'm going to knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, and purl 1. Now I'm going to turn and I'm going to work my next row in the same way. Now I'm ready to start my third row, so what I'll do is to knit my stitches the way they come up. So here I slip this first one, and then I purl 2, I knit 2, I purl 2, I knit 2, I knit the last 2. And now I'm ready to start my fourth row. For my fourth row, I will knit the stitches in the opposite way. First of all, I will slip the first one. So here I have a purl stitch. I'm going to knit it. Then I have 2 knit stitches and I'm going to purl on top of them. 2 purl stitches and I'm going to knit on top of them. Purl on top of the knit stitches and knit on top of the purl stitches, and I'll go on this way until I finish the row. So please finish the row and I will meet you then. I have finished my 4th row. Now I'm ready for the 5th row, and for my 5th row I'm going to knit my stitches the way they come up. So first I slip the first one. Now I have a knit stitch which I'm going to knit, and another knit stitch which I'm going to knit, because the pattern starts from the second stitch. This is not part of the pattern, the first stitch. And again here 2, and purl the last 2. And in this row I have finished the pattern. My pattern is a 4-row pattern. My first row was just knit stitches, so that was not part of the pattern. And then by alternating 2 purl and 2 knit stitches, 2 purl and 2 knit stitches, 2 purl and 2 knit stitches, we create small squares, and we do this for 2 rows, and then for the next 2 rows we knit the opposite stitches on top of each other. We knit the opposite, so we alternate these squares. So now again I'm going to start. This is my 6th row, so I'm going to start by skipping the first stitch, and here I am going to purl, and now I'm going to knit 2 stitches. And this is how I am going to knit on this row. Now I'm ready to start my 7th row. I slip the first stitch. Now here I have to create my square, so I'm purling on top of purl stitches and knitting on top of knit stitches, because this is the 2nd row of my pattern. Purl these 2, knit these 2. You don't need to remember the pattern, you just look at your stitches and what you want to create. When you want to create this knit square, you knit the stitches, and when you need to create a square with purl stitches, you purl them for 2 rows, and then you do the opposite. So here I knit 2, I purl 2, and I knit my last 2. So now 8th row of the gauge. Now I need to change the square, so I will knit the opposite. So here I slip the first one. Here I have a purl stitch, I'm going to knit it. Here I have 2 knit stitches which I'm going to purl on top of them, and then knit 2, purl 2, and knit the last one, which is not a part of the pattern. So again, now I'm on the 9th row. I will need to knit the stitches the way they come up, because this is the 2nd row of my pattern. like this. And like this. As you can see, I think, let me show you, it's quite visible now, the pattern. So please knit the gauge in this way. According to the label, I should knit 22 rows, but I am going to knit 24 because I would like to be able to lay my gauge flat and measure it. So please do it and I will meet you then. And now forget what I've told you about the gauge. I'm going to use some maths in order to cheat. As we said, for the gauge we would need to knit 17 stitches by 22 rows. I added 4 more stitches in order to be able to lay my project flat. So because I don't want to spend so much time for the gauge, what I'm going to do is to use maths. If we need 22 rows in order to get 10 by 10 centimeters, then if we needed 11 rows, we would get 5 centimeters. I have knitted 12 rows because I wanted to be able to lay my project flat. I forgot to say that although I used circular needles, I knitted this gauge flat. So now I'm going to measure the gauge. I pulled out the knitting needles in order to lay my gauge flat. I will start my measurements from this stitch, which is the third stitch, and in order to get 10 centimeters here, I need to knit 14 stitches, so fewer stitches than the gauge. I will need to calculate my project accordingly. As for the length, if I measure 5 centimeters, I will need to have knitted 11 rows. And now I will have to adjust my stitches according to this gauge. Of course, if you are a beginner, it will be better if you knitted a 10 by 10 gauge, so to be sure that you have the correct measurements. So this is the pattern and the gauge for the evergreen sweater. Please watch the next part, which is how to knit the double neck. Thanks for watching and bye for now.